Welcome. This is another episode of Fish Out of Water, the Holy Rat Studio podcast, where we talk about lots of different things, from what is work to what is the responsibility of artists in the face of COVID to just anything related to the mission that we have in Holy Rat, of course, which is to make a more equitable future, a more inclusive future, a more diverse future, and a more responsible future through entrepreneurship, through the creative process, and start bridging the gap, I think, between the concept that artists are not entrepreneurs and actually that entrepreneurs are not artists. We feel like that actually they're one and the same in a lot of ways, and that the compartmentalization, I think, of information is a lot of what sort of perpetuates a lot of these issues. Welcome. I'm Daryl O. I'm the founder of Holy Rat Studio, of course. And we have, who else hosting today?
We have Elena Franco. I'm the Director of Research and Development.
And
I'm Saskia de Bourgrave. I'm the Director of Content and Operations.
Yeah. So Elena, I feel like, should probably intro this topic because she's the person who has probably illuminated us, Saskia and I, to this subject over the last 10 years of knowing you, Ellen. I feel like this topic is something that we've really landed on a lot. Even though I was an artist and you were going to school to become a lawyer, we ended up talking a lot about what is work.
Well, it was when I realized, I was like, as a photographer, you have a trade. And because I went to school and I got a liberal arts degree.
Well, hold on. Let's actually establish what the topic is.
So today we're going to talk about what is work. And like Daryl kind of said in the beginning, that concept and how we as individuals understand work and our role as an employee, as a business owner, as whatever that is, and the blurredness of our reality and the potential of people to shift into a new kind of role as how we make money has ever more options.
Yeah, but I think in order to even have a philosophical conversation or to have a critique on the economy at all, we first have to have the same definition of terms. Right? I don't think a lot of people stop and actually start from that basic step. My definition of work might be different from your definition of work, which may be different from the World Economic Forum's definition of work. And so if we're not establishing the definition out the gate, we're not actually going to be having the same conversation. So, Elena, what to you right now is the conventional definition of work, maybe from a legal employer-employee standpoint?
Yeah, it's basically a agreement to exchange my time for something of value, money, that I can then use to live on this planet, which takes money because a lot of things, including taxes and just you have to pay to live here. So I have to work to live here, even. And that is a concept that I struggle with a lot.
I think we all do.
Because Mother Earth does not make us pay taxes. Let us remind ourselves. We as humans created that. No one at the watering hole makes you say, excuse me, giraffe, $5.
Yeah. So at some point in time, whether you read Sapiens or whether you just have common sense, at some point in time, somebody said, I own this. Which means that if you want to have access to it, you've got to give me something or be a part of this community in some way. And so humans really invented the gate, which invented money, which invented ownership. But I think sometimes we're born into capitalism. We're born into these structures. We assume that they're actually a part of nature, but they are not. At some point in time, we made the decision that you have to pay to live. But we've also, so many of us have had our basic human connection to be able to live on this planet for free. Those skills have been torn away from us. We are no longer.
I don't know how to forage. I would die.
I don't know if anybody else who's listening right now is binging the Alone series on Netflix, but it's the same exact thing. Killer Mike talks about this all the time. Is that we technically don't have to pay to live on this earth.
No, we don't.
But
We've been born into a system which has made us incapable of
knowing how to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Of that skill.
So what does that mean, I think, for us, Elena? Like, what does that mean that we have to live to work? Like, we've created that structure.
Work to live.
I have to do something, whether that's with my hands or with my mind, to do something that creates something of value that then I can exchange for something else of value. And it's constantly a give and a take. And I would say it's been very unequal. And that's why I think our concept of work really, when I think of work, I think of employee. Like that's my automatic thing. And I think of this job market. But those things are really illusions and things of the past, and really things that I think have kept us in really a limited concept of work, because as humans, we innately create. That is natural. It's natural for us to create something, you know? We can sell that thing, and that's how a lot of people like make sure they do live here, because they have something to exchange. But I mean, I think that that's like,
that's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
That's not the same thing as punching a clock to exchange your happiness to do work for somebody else's dream.
To have a roof over your house, to feed yourself.
That's
like,
that subtle difference, I think, really is why there are people that I know who make a lot of money and struggle to be satisfied or feel like they're contributing anything. Yeah. Because ultimately what they're doing is they're exchanging their work that normally is a direct experience with the source, right? You know, when you're gardening a plant and you harvest that plant and then you eat that plant, it's very different than being an employee or other things on somebody else's plantation or somebody else's garden and getting paid to harvest and sow somebody else's land. Can you actually press OK there? Because I think we got paused for a second. Yeah, so what I think I blew my mind was when you were studying for the bar. And you were specifically going over the section about contract law, and a part of that section was talking about the language, the legal language that exists
the
behind.
test. I mean, this is real. I mean, this is called the control test. What determines the differentiation between being an independent contractor and being an employee is literally the physical control that your employer has over what you're doing. So
and
like
your body, actually.
Like it really is your body, which is like, you're coming into the office and from this time to this time, you're going to be doing this. I'm going to give you a 30-minute break. It's literally that kind of, I'm going to tell you what you're going to be doing and most likely how you're going to be doing it. And that, like, when you really break that down, you really see we're really not that far away removed from, you know,
the master servant.
And it really is a master servant mentality. I mean, like, that is literally, I think we saw the photo and I'll make sure that we can attach it. Cause like you'll see in my own bar exam, like this is like literally in legal textbooks are talking about master servant. Like it really is, it is that. And we all don't question that we need to make money to survive, but how we do it and how do you live a life where you're thriving?
Yeah, but can we connect the dots to not being satisfied by having a stable salary, right?
Yeah.
You know, how many people we know who are exchanging their happiness for the stability and they're making six figures, but we get phone call after phone call saying, I can't stand it. I can't take another day.
It's a lack of purpose.
Yeah.
It's a lack of purpose. Yeah. But I think in terms of like employee-employer relationship versus like subcontractor and whoever hired you, the first time I learned about that was when we took that business course, and that lawyer came in and was like, these are the things that an employer is allowed to ask of an employee. These are the things that a client is allowed to ask of a subcontractor. Daryl and I looked at each other and we were like, well, technically we should be suing like every client we've ever worked for.
And the line is gray.
And ever since I found out about that, more and more members who come to me who are on like a subcontractor relationship, but are answering calls like, you know, 5 times a day, answering to not their employer, their client, answering to their client like they are an employee, and they're on a W-9. And that, I'm not saying that it should be an employee relationship, but I'm saying like subcontractors should have more knowledge on what can actually be asked of them when they enter a relationship with a client.
Well, what's the fundamental difference that is like probably the biggest control test in terms of deciding whether or not your client or your employer is overstepping the bounds.
Well, that I think
of
it's a great like legal fun question because, and that's I think actually what really sparked this was watching Uber, right? So like watching Daryl like create Holy Rat and always those questions about the sharing economy, and then watching Uber, where from one angle I'm like, wow, this is so great. Somebody can just plug in and get some extra cash, but then you see what Uber's doing, and they're making sure they're independent contractors and not employees, and you're like, why are you doing that?
What's the benefit
behind that? And you're like, oh, you don't got to pay any taxes on these people.
Exactly. You don't have to provide health care.
You don't got to do anything. So from one angle, we're over here being like entrepreneurs, right? And like this is a way that like you can really like get your clients. You don't need to be an employer. You can really get that whole budget. But then on the other end, you have these companies that are completely using this in a really evil way to ensure that they don't have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah, and so the circumstantial procedures ultimately do control the bodies, the time, the resources that an Uber driver has to put in, right? Because
Uber's still saying all those things, but
they're not actually enforcing it. It's the system in place.
Well, it's interesting. The state of California has deemed have created a whole thing around saying no, actually you are going to have to categorize them. You've misclassified them as employees, and that's where a lot of companies can get in trouble is the misclassification between an employee and an
because the Uber
contractor.
drivers were suing Uber. Because they were saying like inherently in the design, the model of Uber, the design of Uber is that people can rate you, and you have to actually follow certain guidelines and protocols. And drivers were coming forward saying like, by telling me what to do and how to behave and where to go and how many hours I should be hitting, like I'm not a subcontractor.
But it's not even the hours set by Uber, right?
Yeah.
For example, if somebody is leasing a car to be an Uber driver, that's an expense. It's like $400 a month, I think, in New York City.
More.
Then on top of that, you have fees that you're giving to Uber, which means that if you get sick, in order to catch up on those 6 days, because you're not an employee, you don't get paid leave, you have to do overtime hours, but you don't get the benefit of overtime hours because you're not an employee. And so here, Uber is pandering a narrative where it's like, be your own boss. And it's like, okay, that's great in theory, but if you don't own the car,
or even know that you can expense it because you are an independent contractor,
and you're not educating the
that is something.
That is just sort of being like, well, I didn't actively tell a lie, but I also didn't tell the truth. Like it's just that gray area that Uber lives in that really frustrates you because any of the staff that works for Uber corporate, I mean, they're not a profitable company because they have so many VCs or whatever, but all of those employees, they have crazy benefits. They have crazy benefits because they are employees, right? So they get paid family leave. They get, and Uber is held accountable to the laws of the state where their headquarters office is, right? Which I think is in California, right? It's a pretty liberal state. So they're required to be held accountable to those regulations, but that's where the issue is. I think when people are like, okay, well, we should just regulate more. But when Uber has unlimited resources and unlimited, just
they're going to fight tooth and nail in the legal courts, and they're going to get a decision. And that's the irony is that California is going one way, but Trump and his administration have been like, actually, no, we don't think gig workers are employees. So now you have again, it's just a cycle of, but it brings out the larger conversation of, what is work? What is an employer? And I didn't even know that independent contractor was even a thing. Like, we're literally just taught one thing, that you're going to go be someone else's employee. I mean, you're going to only have a W-2.
The way we go to school. I mean, I talk about this in my Notion class where it's like, the reason why we don't necessarily have the skills of being our own boss is because when did you learn that skill? From the moment you are born, right? You get the bus at this time. You eat lunch at this time. We're literally
you can go to the courtyard and run outside for this time, for this long, and that's it. And you come back and you sit down.
But then I think the saddest part is that people who say, well, I want to go freelance because it's like so exciting. Where is the education aspect of what it means to be a freelancer?
Yeah, we don't know how to empower ourselves.
Or to protect ourselves.
Exactly.
From those relationships. And it works both ways. Like you have the clients who hire their subcontractors and treat them like employees. But then you have the clients who, or employers who hire their employees, but treat them kind of like subcontractors and actually should be paying them a lot more money for what they're doing. We've had members who have worked in creative agencies as employees. So they get sent out on the jobs as videographer, as editor,
on salary, as a flat rate.
On salary as a flat rate. And you look at these line items and you think, well, if you'd been paid out as a freelancer, you would have made twice the amount this year.
Yeah.
But they want to profit from your name on that line item and just pay you your, base salary.
As a small business owner, I don't necessarily blame that small business from wanting to do the more affordable option, right? Because the benefit of being an employee is that you're not wondering when your next paycheck is coming from.
It's the security.
And the security of knowing where your next check actually has more of a dollar value. Right? So it's like, if I can get $5,000 every month guaranteed, I'd prefer the $5,000 guaranteed than $10,000 maybe. So what that creates is a power dynamic inherently between the employer and the employee. And the power dynamic is that the small business owner has the resources of a lawyer or somebody to know, or a CPA like we do, to navigate those things. But not everybody is going to be like us, where our mission is about empowering the subcontractor. You know what I'm saying? We're empowering the freelancer, empowering the entrepreneur. And so it would be one thing if Uber was also providing entrepreneurial classes to help those Uber drivers to take advantage of the tax loophole benefits so that they can write everything off. Because how many Uber drivers I've actually been in the car with, and I've had this discussion, and I was like, well, you can write off your car, right? And they go, what do you mean? They go, what do you mean? And it just breaks your heart.
Tax knowledge. I mean, it all comes down to
That's something else we're not taught, though.
Not at all. It's not even on the bar exam. I mean, you're taught, I don't know where else I would learn that, where anyone would learn this.
LegalZoom.
And even that, who's in it? It blows my mind. It really does, because that's where all of a sudden I do have the potential to change the game if I were to understand what I could write off and the different structures that I could use, because your employer is using those to their advantage.
But let's have an argument for a second around why it is that we believe in entrepreneurship and independent contracting, even if there are some more burdens, right? So for example, if you're an independent contractor, your client is not paying taxes. You are taking on the burden of taxes. And as being a self-employed, you're in a high tax bracket. Federally, and especially in a liberal state like New York, I mean, a minimum of 30% of your income isn't yours. I mean, I hope that every single independent contractor that's listening to this podcast right now, when they get $500, they truly only see it as $250, because that's all you're getting.
I know.
So why, if there's all of these opportunities for Uber drivers to be taken advantage of as independent contractors, why, Elena, do we have a philosophy that that's still in some ways a better option than being an employee?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that it's much more empowering. I mean, there is a burden of knowledge that you're going to have to get
and
over,
responsibility
to get to the place where it does become a benefit. Because in the beginning, it's not going to be, and it's going to feel like a lot of work, because somebody in some other company has already built up all of those things and all those structures and platforms to allow you to reap the reward of being like, hey, client, I can absolutely do that job. Me, myself, and my one other person, I can take home that big check, and I deserve it. So I think that there is a lot of benefit, but it does take work, and it is really empowering, because all of a sudden you're learning the tools that a lot of these companies that we are like, how are they doing that? No.
But you're also tapping into something that I think is inherently human, which is something that we talk about a lot, and why we tried to tell the entrepreneurs that apply to our membership, you are an artist and your business is your art project. Because as humans, I think, whatever your belief system is, I think it's safe to say that our purpose here is to make, is to create. And so when you are chattel, when you are a servant to a master, and I put quotes around that because that is the legal language inside of a lot of your employment contracts that you do not read and will not be able to understand because of the legalese. But are you giving tacit consent, I think, on a metaphysical level, that you are being paid to create, not for yourself. You're not tapping into that flow that everybody's talking about. That's why your $100,000 check is leaving you feeling like, what's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of money? Why am I doing this? I'm miserable. I hate coming into work I hate doing this. I don't even believe in the work that I'm doing. I don't even feel any sort of, feel like a cog in the wheel, right? It's really interesting that is a catalyst for people becoming entrepreneurs, and that those folks are feeling so much more satisfied at making half the amount of money. But what are they satisfying? right? They're satisfying something that is inherently human, that we all deserve to feel. I plant this seed, the seed grows from my blood, sweat, and tears, working with Mother Nature, and I get to eat the zucchini that I make from that seed, right? That feeling is, it's priceless in a lot of ways. It is absolutely priceless. So what is missing, I think, and the reason for why there are not more entrepreneurs and why there's a disproportionate amount of people who look a certain way and are from a certain socioeconomic background that enter into the entrepreneurial space is because of the fact that it does take a lot of self-knowledge. And that self-knowledge requires time, and time is expensive.
And I think
the people who have the ability to enter into the entrepreneurial marketplace are the same people that get to enter into the artistic art place, right? Where they have the privilege or the savings.
What if it looks like not making money for a year?
Exactly. Exactly.
But it's also saying, like, it's flipping the script, right? Because once you do that, money is a tool for good. Like, once you really learn to, like, master some of those tools, you are flipping the frequency that you're able to live in. You know, you're actually able to go from surviving to thriving.
And every single time you go in to put into the work, it's because you're doing it for yourself. Right? You know, with great skill comes great responsibility.
Spider-Man.
Listen, that quote is really relevant here because, you know, if you want the benefit of being your own boss, and I don't mean that. I
know the hashtag
influencer, be your own boss. I'm the CEO,
but
even though I don't have a registered LLC. Okay, I see you people with your bios. But you know, shade aside, like once you are willing to take on the responsibility, that responsibility is very different from waking up in the morning and knowing that you're taking on the responsibility of somebody else's life, somebody else's dream, somebody else's desire. And that's not to say that there are not companies to work out there
100%.
That are good to work for and will treat you right and give you health care. And in this country, in some ways, that is the only way that you get health care.
And I will say also, like, not everyone is meant to be
their own boss.
You know, or even from like a freelance perspective, like my sister, for example, like does not like freelancing. Like she doesn't like it. She doesn't like the unpredictability, the effort that it takes. Like she tried to do that in yoga. And so she got it, you know, a job that has like stable money, and she still creates, like she still continues to create. The purpose is still there.
She's being satisfied. That aspect of her life is being satisfied outside of work. But I think in an environment where technology is allowing us to work more, and especially working from home. Okay. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you are working from home and your employer expects you to work outside of the regular office hours, that's called taking advantage of you. That is not okay. But because work and home life is being blurred, and because technology is allowing more accessibility, there are a lot of people who are not in your sister's position where she's working for a restaurant, she's leaving her work and then coming into a space where she can create and be satisfied, right?
They're not tapping into her outside of her hours.
But there are a lot of us who, I mean, I used to work at an e-commerce startup, and I told myself, oh my God, I'm making a consistent living. I'm going to do my art on the weekends. Sis, I did not have the energy after a 12-hour workday working for somebody else's dream, for somebody else's equity in a business that I didn't really care about, to be like, there's no way in hell that I'm ever going to satisfy the creator in me, because I'm giving all of my creativity to an institution for a check, but I can't even use that check on the thing that I want to. And so it's this catch-22. And so when we say entrepreneurship is a pathway to freedom, right? That is an implication of freedom if you are incapable of getting it in other ways.
Exactly. Because there are people who are going to be satisfied working. There are
good employers who do still give you that freedom.
It's the concept that like that is not considered an option. That like I was never told that like, you know, it is like you can go be a business, you know, but like it's not a clear path of go be a lawyer, go be a doctor, you know, as to how you can do that.
Well, a conversation we started to have, like, which actually sparked the idea of having this episode, was, Daryl, you said like, you were calling out the people who say like, I want to be my own boss, but do not have the ability to commit to being their own boss. Like, what is that? What are they not commit? Like, why doesn't it work for them?
Well, you know, I think it's I think that we underestimate how much we have to unlearn in order to be our own boss.
Yes.
And it's because there is not an example outside of us, and examples outside of us are the thing that I think we have used to learn anything, right? The way we value ourselves. Oh, I guess straight hair is on TV, so that's what's pretty. So I don't have straight hair, so I'm not pretty, right? That externalization. So when we take ownership of being our own boss, right? And we're like, I love my curly hair, or I love this part of myself. Like, we're only thinking about it, I think, in sort of a very topical, sort of like self-empowerment way. Yeah. And so that's great in theory, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the details of the how of it, you were never taught how to make your own roadmap, right? Like, again, plugging my Notion course, shameless plug. You guys, if you're a member, you should be taking it. If you're not, you should join for it. That class is literally addressing that very issue, right? The first episode is purely philosophical. All I talk about is how you are born and indoctrinated into a system where you are constantly being told what to do. The metaphor I use is like being given a map, a roadmap, right? So when you go to school, the teacher is not only your navigation guide, but they are using a map that has been inside the school system for a decade. Decades. And considering how fast our society is moving, that's a problem. So the map is most definitely outdated. But that's besides the point, right? You're given a map, you're given a compass, and you are told this is the path that you're going to go on. When you're on that path, there are little markers so you don't get lost. There are confirmations that you're doing well by getting an A. Okay, now you can go to the next one. I graduated here. I can go to the next one. I can go to the next one. It's a board game that somebody hands you. Okay, but when has anybody? I mean, I didn't experience this. I had very privileged education, you know, and I definitely learned skills that I think empowered me to become an entrepreneur later. But fundamentally, nobody ever stopped and said, okay, Daryl, well, where do you want to go? Where has anybody been there before? Okay, if nobody's been there before, this is how you write a map. This is how you actually get from
map
A to B.
The unknown. Everything is known. They're pointing you in directions of like, again, it's all about control. Like we know, like, you know, a very known destination.
And so when we use the metaphor, it makes it very clear. It's like, obviously you're not going to use somebody else's map to navigate a place that you've never been before, because a map has never been created. But that's what freedom is. If you have the confidence and you have the ability to recognize that humans inherently are explorers. We know how it's somewhere deep inside a knowingness that can navigate that, but because it's been stifled and muted and never exercised, it's been atrophied. And so then we feel like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? But we're too close to the issue to even be aware enough that okay, Camilla. Yeah, totally.
Hey girl.
I agree.
This is why people are arguing that young students in school should be writing their why statements like before even having to choose whether they want to go to university. Like I think that's really important. And then even on the you go into an education system that's teaching you how to be an employee. You also, if you choose to go to university, like you're choosing by markers that also lead you down like the employment route. Like I remember looking at NYU and then being like, we have a success rate of this many students being employed. And that was to go to like a creative, section of the school.
It's the same thing in the legal. The reason why no one told me that like you don't have to be a bar attorney and like that's not the only way is because the school, their ranking is based upon how you'll pass the. I mean, it's all so embedded that they're not incentivized to give you any other way.
Obviously, the tools of measurement are going to be manipulated so that we're showing a certain result. I mean, that's why like statistics actually isn't even a science. On some level, it's just like a judgment call. Like it's because tools of measurement that are out there are not necessarily going to be able to capture success rates based off of entrepreneurship. But also, we're not going to be able to capture success rates unless everybody has the same definition of success. And that fundamentally is another issue that we should be talking about, is why your definition of success is supposed to be the same as my definition of success.
I know.
preposterous.
Yeah.
But we're not inside of places where we're asking those questions. I mean, inside of an institution, they're not going to teach you how to question the institution.
Yeah. Facts.
Right? So that's why artists, in a lot of ways, we feel, because we are inherently taking on a lens that is an observation and in critique, it's important for entrepreneurs, I think, to learn that skill. But it's important for all of us right now in the face of this environment and COVID and just looking at the economy, just the fact that we're close to such an important election, seemingly. Obviously we're very cynical at this moment. It doesn't mean that we cannot have hope for people's resiliency. It's just that I don't think that people feel that encouraged to go down the entrepreneurial path.
Because it's hard.
Yes.
It's really,
but it's
really
hard because there aren't enough examples.
Exactly.
We're not simplifying. We're not giving accessibility to
Which is
these.
again why Daryl's Notion class is so important.
Yeah.
And really our whole school. Because that's really, I think, the passion behind why we're even doing this and why we do what we do is because I am like, want to stand on top of a mountain and be like, hello.
Yeah.
Everybody.
There's another way.
There's another way. Yeah. And like the tools, it's not, you just got to do a little bit more digging, but it's not that, you're not that far off. We're just really kind of spun in a circle, blindfolded and then shoved into a room being like, okay, now go navigate the board.
Yeah.
But it's not just access to information, right? One of our members and close partners, Enigma Crush, who's a very talented photographer, but he's an entrepreneur, he's a dad, he's like got a really wide range of experiences. He used to be an EMT. He's passionate about teaching, not because he has like, a Master of Fine Arts from like Corcoran Institute, right, in DC. It's because, and he doesn't, he has expert advice on how to not be an expert and teach yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
because
powerful.
information is out there. YouTube exists. I mean, like Linda exists. Like we're in an information age.
Yeah.
Why aren't we having more people apply the knowledge? It's because we do not stop and do the internal work to say, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? What do I want to create? What am I passionate about? And is that something that is deserving of being paid for? I mean, we all believe the answer is yes, but I think there's a lot of struggle out there because as soon as you have to hold up a mirror to yourself, it's incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Being on the other side of that process has been, I mean, that's why we're preaching on the top of a soapbox, being like, this is the way, you know?
Yeah.
We want to be inclusive, of course. We understand that not everybody's going to fit into our box. That would be deeply ironic, right? But what we are saying is like the foundation of being human is to create, make, and contribute.
Yeah,
and to see that come to life outside of yourself, right? We have the ability to take an idea and turn it into a reality. And I mean, I don't know, like that's pretty powerful shit. But if we do not have self-worth and if we do not know how to answer the question, why am I here?
Why?
Right?
Yeah.
Camilla's here to nap and get snuggles. I, on the other hand, struggled a long time to figure out my why. Yeah. And I think the reason for why entrepreneurship is such an empowering process, at least for me, was because I encountered a roadblock, right? I encountered a really severe roadblock in upward economic mobility in terms of being able to just not survive but thrive in New York City as an artist. And I took that problem, found a solution for myself. And when you do that, if you keep it to yourself, in some ways, like you're really preventing, the possibility of helping somebody else. I mean, just the fact that I could help just one person, with the resources that I created for myself, that would be enough. But the fact that it can happen over and over again now is it's the best drug in the world. It's the most satisfying feeling, and it's more powerful than a paycheck in a lot of ways.
I mean, I think also like the difference between the people who choose to take that path and the people who choose to take, I'm not going to say steady paycheck, I'm going to say really big paycheck, is also a difference in lifestyle. Like,
and that's okay.
That's okay. Like, what brings you happiness?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it is just consumerism,
and that's okay. Like,
I want
it.
Like,
exactly.
Yeah,
I want to have a home, a big home, and I want to own. Like, so valid.
Yeah, I mean, it's reductionist for us to say that money doesn't bring a certain level of comfort, and that certain level of comfort allows you to take more risk, and taking more risk means that you're able to get more benefits. Like there is a connection inside of a capitalist society where money does make a difference. That is important. However, I also deplore every single person to think about the people who are wildly financially successful and still end up in deep sadness or deep loss or deep depression or just complete and utter devastation. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if many people are a Jim Carrey fan. Like, he's not for everybody, but that is something that I always that resonated with me. He's got so many interviews where he's just constantly talking about how he wishes everybody could get a chance to be super financially successful, only to discover that all your problems don't go away. At least the ones in here, like really deep down, that are like, who am I? Like that there's no amount of money in the world that can answer that question for you.
Exactly. But I think we're at a time in history where never before people had the option to potentially really have so many more ways to make money, really explore the different pathways instead of just literally being like a worker, you know?
Well, especially with everyone getting fired in a global pandemic.
I wasn't even like yes.
I mean,
but I mean 100%. Like
what's your next move?
Yeah.
And where do you go to even, maybe Daryl's Notion class, but where do you go to even like find out what your next move could be?
But there's also a silver lining, okay? Like we of course have to understand that there is severe devastation and there is just deep loss in this time. Absolutely. So we have to respect that, pay homage to that, and empathize with that. However, on the other side of it, all of us curled up at home, maybe we log into our computer at 8:30 so that our boss can see that we're on the clock, but we're also doing our nails at the same time, or we don't put pants on.
Wait, there are employers who actually keep their cameras on their employees the whole day so they can watch that you're working.
See, that's a master-servant relationship
a friend of mine
that's not going to be for me. To each their own. But, with this downtime, I think all of us are sort of, there's a lot more questioning of the system that is, right? Because you're no longer in the grind. Get up, do this, do that, get on the subway, get there, sit down, finish, go home, repeat. And you don't have any moment to pause and go, is this what I want? Yeah. This is what it is. Yeah.
Well, I think that's also like why so many people in New York, especially, I'm sure other places, but this is where we're experiencing it. People in New York, say, I'm going to quit this. I'm going to quit this. Like, I'm going to quit it. But time moves so quickly that you just never have the time to pause. Every time we say like pause and ask yourself, like, who are you? Like, some of us don't have a second in the week to do that. It's really, really hard to do that in New York, which again comes back to why a lot of people say, and we do agree, like there's a silver lining to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's the slowing down of things.
Yeah.
The slowing down and having to look at
Which
yourself in the mirror.
Which at first was terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, those first 3 days of us being like, wait, we can't go to the studio. I mean, that was chaos.
No, and I don't want to be like be at a pedestal, like preaching like we're some grand example of like self-actualization. No, we also experienced that.
We experienced
the
it.
irony is that we're here to talk about the entrepreneurial like pathway to freedom, and we are taking that on. But we also are a small business that was in the grind responding.
Like, how do we adapt?
So many things we wanted to do, and we were like, well, next year, let's just push that to next year. Let's push it to next year because we can't do that right now. And all of a sudden, our physical studios disappeared from underneath our feet. I mean, they didn't disappear. Like, we still have them, obviously, but they couldn't be open. And we had to ask ourselves the question of like, has our lifestyle been bringing us happiness?
Yeah.
Is this structure actually scalable?
Is this going in the direction that we want to go?
Yeah. Because
are we happy?
I don't want to be a studio manager for the rest of my life.
Yeah. But
I'm saying that out loud.
I think that is something that is very revealing about all of this, is that were we really moving so fast because we had to, or were we creating an illusion, or was the situation creating an illusion where we weren't actively choosing to continue that every day? Right? I think there is an illusion of no choice in these situations, but there are two choices. One's just shittier than the other.
Yeah.
Right? And so we don't see the shittier option or the one that feels more difficult as an option, right? If we're in the middle of running our two businesses, we're trying to scale, we're trying to bring more clientele, we're trying to expand our membership model. Of course, halting everything, closing the doors on both of our locations for a week and just focusing on actually figuring out the next 5 years or figuring out the next 2 years. It was always a choice, but there is an illusion that it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so that is really where slowing down and recognizing that I think in COVID, we've always had that option.
It was on our to-do list. It was just at the bottom.
Yeah. And certainly privilege and the fact that we are, still a growing business. There are months where we don't know where our next paycheck is coming from still, even if we're in a business, we still resonate with the entrepreneurial
100%.
freelancer experience of, being 100% responsible of your revenue, 100% responsible for anything that you have to put on your table. It's not a guaranteed paycheck. We own our own company, but I'm the one signing the checks to myself, right?
Yeah.
It's the same exact experience as the freelancer. If we don't do our job to, keep everything afloat, there's this scarcity thing that I think we've also been indoctrinated into. It's okay, well, we have to say yes to this money because we don't know where the next paycheck is coming from, and we have to have faith that saying no to that paycheck that's not good for us or that's going to prevent us from slowing down and actually putting in the work to really review where we're going and the trajectory we're going in is something that we should continue, I hope, even after COVID and after the pandemic. We need to remember that choice is always there, that we don't need to be rushing, that in order for us to truly take advantage of the freedom that entrepreneurship provides, it requires us to remember that it's always there, right? We're going to default, I think, to those norms of being well, I have to get that assignment in and then I have to do this and then I have to do that and I have to do this. And it's everything isn't actually all crashing down in that moment, but because we're just being bombarded with information externally about how there's a rush or that, if we don't do this, we're not going to get as many followers or we're not going to, and so at this point, when we're talking about labor and we're talking about work, we wanted to have it inside of the context of COVID because if we've had these conversations before, it's very hard to hear that advice. Because you're a freelancer, rent is due in a couple of weeks always, you are grinding it out to try and survive in a city that's very expensive. And so we would have conversations with our members often that would be okay, well, if you just take the time to stop and invest in yourself, you should have faith that you're actually going to get the benefit of being your own boss. But it fell on deaf ears because when you're in survival mode, when you're in fight or flight, your brain
you can't hear it.
Your brain is actually neurologically cutting off the other places that allow you to sort of problem solve in a more creative way. So this is why the economics of access to space and access to resources at an affordable rate really is, I think, the ground level issue that means that entrepreneurship is not accessible to everybody.
But access to also, people who are going through the exact same thing as you. I think that's the scariest part about going freelance is you feel completely alone.
Is this how this goes? Do I write it like this? Is this
there isn't a manual on how you should be pricing yourself per everything that you can do freelance. I mean, you can literally create your own job. It might not exist yet. And you have to decide how you're going to price that. We have to wrap up.
Oh my gosh, already?
It's been 45 minutes.
Wow, okay. So clearly we could talk forever.
Literally.
So
this was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, like this whim situational podcast.
I guess that is the podcast format, right? Just start on a topic, see where it goes. Bring a cat.
Bring a cat.
Look at this. It's fantastic.
Living
Hello.
her best life.
So, for those of you who are listening to our podcast the first time, definitely go check out some of the other interviews that we have. The topic of conversation in terms of freelancing and entrepreneurship is something we were always going to discuss, but we want to hear from you guys. What questions do you have? What other issues do you want us to explore? We have got a plethora of knowledge here in Miss Elena Franco. We also host our podcast episodes on Spotify. So what I recommend that you do is go to YouTube, Google, search in the search bar holyrad_studio. I think we'll probably circle back on this conversation about what is work, what is labor.
Oh, this is ongoing. It's our favorite topic.
Yeah. And
one of my favorite topics.
Just plugging the Holy Rad Studio membership again. cat butt, that Elena Franco is going to be doing a Business 101 course that talks about the different types of businesses, the different types of entities, because I think that's also the other thing that comes with the idea of like starting your own business or being an entrepreneur, is that you've got to have all these like official documents.
Well, you just got to understand like what your employer was doing is what you then have to learn to navigate. And that's really just, again, it's another kind of, it takes a minute to learn it, but once you do.
Yeah. And we're going to help you to get through all of the legalese and all the jargon.
Help you throughout the whole process.
Get through the bureaucratic process. Because that's ultimately all we're sharing on this podcast is like, this is what we created. This is how we created it. If you want to do something similar, we can tell you how. So thank you guys for supporting, listening. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to come back to us this time next week for another podcast episode, and go ahead and go through our archive. If you're interested in becoming a Holy Rad member, you can always just visit our website at holyradstudio.com. Follow us on Instagram at holyrad_studio.
You have got that down.
I've got that down, you guys. I'm becoming like a podcast host. We've got this down. So yeah, thanks for listening to us ramble, and we will see you next week.
Yeah.